Okay,
Clockwork
let me
Orange.
throw this. I'll throw this out to both of you. Can you think of any reason why someone would claim to love this film or want to see it more than once? It's so ugly. You know, to me, it's like watching Fight Club, which is such an ugly film. I don't get
I
it.
can cite a friend of mine. I mentioned this when I wrote about it. This would have been early 70s, but not when it came out. I'd seen it before. He hadn't. He laughed through the whole thing. Over, he said, "Man, I love this movie. It was such a comedy. He thought it was hilarious." I don't know why. Well, I mean, I guess I do in a way, but no, he liked it. I don't know if he saw it now what he would think, but certainly at the time he thought it was funny.
Well, treating it as a comedy probably makes more sense to me than, you know, saying it has something profound to say about violence or human nature. I don't know. Sorry, I was just trying to go to whatever notes I made here. I didn't make as many on Clockwork Orange. Where are we here? Drafts. Okay, let's see. Well, one thing I noticed, it's part of this, there was this whole wave preoccupation with violence films in 1971, Dirty Harry, Straw Dogs, and the one that I would compare it to in a way though, not really, but there's this film called Desperate Characters with Shirley MacLaine, which is sort of, I mean, Clockwork Orange is such a weird universe. Like it's hard to, the people that they end up violating, they don't really even seem to, they're out in the middle of who knows where. But Desperate Characters is kind of about violence and suburbia and all of that. And there just seemed to be a real, I guess because of Nixon and Law and Order, there seemed to be a real preoccupation with that topic in that particular year, maybe stretching into 72 or so.
Sorry, guys.
I
removed.
Let your brother go.
So do you guys think it has anything to say about violence and human nature, or like he's this violent guy and then he's brainwashed out of it and then the film ends with him brainwashed back into it again?
I think to the extent there's a philosophical bent here, it's about free will. The violence is window dressing. I think that they want us to believe that a person without free will is not a person at all. And the violence is what he uses to get the point across. But I don't think really it's a commentary about violence. I mean, it is as you watch it, you react to the violence, but I don't think that's what Kubrick is really interested in.
That's interesting. That's interesting because that's kind of the point of view. There is a libertarian streak in the film, and it seems to be very, even who's the guy that gives a terrible performance? The writer.
Patrick McGee.
Patrick McGee, who seems to belong to this group that, or does belong to this group that is questioning the government's interference with Alex, even though he was victimized by it. And until he realizes who Alex is, he treats him as a victim. So yeah, it would make sense that is the preoccupation.
I have to say something in Patrick McGee's defense, because I ripped the shit out of him many times. For me, this is the movie where Kubrick's problem with acting really starts. And it's just a disaster, as you point out. But if you read what he had to say at the time, he said, Stan, you know, I'm kind of over the top here. Maybe we should bring it down a little bit. No, go higher. I want you to go more. It was Kubrick that wanted him to be that way.
Man, those close-ups where it is.
Yes.
So
Well, also that's if it's not Kubrick, it's him telling the cinematographer how to do it. All the stuff that Kubrick does there to make him look horrible and to encourage him to be horrible as an actor. The guy is, in other things, he's not always a bad actor. He's terrible at that. Well, I totally agree.
He's good. He's good in Barry Lyndon. Pretty sure he's in Barry Lyndon, and he plays the Chevalier or somebody. He's good. I don't know. Are there any other notably bad performances? And Malcolm McDowell, he's even Cale, who hated the film. I think he was on her list. They used to do published in New York Film Critics ballots, and I think she picked him as the best performance of that year, or one of her three.
One of the reasons the movie, for me, is so unbalanced, but which I think is what Kubrick wanted. McDowell is so charismatic. He's on the screen all the time, and he's narrating all the time, and we're glad because he's the most interesting thing in the movie. But it's so contrasted to the Patrick McGee's of the movie. Think of the guy who, I don't even know what his job was. He like a teacher in a school, the one that gets going, yes, he had this odd, all of them, they're just terrible. The Droogs, they're all terrible. And on purpose, honestly, it's just like in 2001 when he makes Hal entertaining and then he tells the astronauts to bring it down. And I say, for good reason. In this movie, Malcolm McDowell is the only recognizable human being in the whole movie, and he's the narrator and he's charismatic. So of course we root for him because there's nothing else to root for in that movie. He's cool. When he comes up with Singing in the Rain, which he apparently made up on the spot, it's cool. Gene Kelly didn't think so, but that was cool. Everything he does basically. And so then when he gets tortured, we're like, oh, poor Alex, we love him, And when he gets out after he's been made a good person and he's treated like shit, and he's poor, I'm gonna kill myself. I mean, holy cow! I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's great stuff. It's the way I got through rewatching it again, just watching him at work.
Did that character become kind of an icon for punk or glam, at least?
I think to a certain degree, I seem to think Bowie might have been a fan
Yeah.
of that movie or something. I do
Just the
recall
look
something
of
like that. And yeah,
the look
the very
seems like-
severe sort of look, right?
Right. Another thing that bugged me about it when I rewatched it the other night was Kubrick spends time on this procedural stuff. He takes forever, pointlessly, like getting Alex into prison. They get him to empty his pockets, and they go through one by one everything in his pockets. And I know they're showing how regimented it is there, and the guard who's in charge is ridiculous. But what does this serve? It's just get him into prison and get on to something else. It just
For Full Metal Jacket when he spends an entire first half of a movie showing the dehumanizing process. The military here is in jail, and he does it for 10 minutes. That's
yeah, it's just crazy. What about the use of Beethoven? Is that effective?
I haven't seen the movie in a long time, too long to comment. I'll have one comment about the movie, but I mean, I remember the Beethoven stuff, and I thought it was pretty interesting at the time, but it's been too long since I've seen it to say. So
it's another example of how isn't Alex great?
What's that?
I think it's another way for us to think Alex is great. We assume he's going to like whatever would be the current music of the day, but no, he loves Beethoven, Ludwig van. He loves Beethoven. They use Beethoven as part of the way they torture him. And again, well, that's just terrible. He likes Beethoven and they're torturing him. I think that's why it's there. I'm very cynical about the whole process.
What about the brainwashing sequence? Because does it stand up with the other two? I think, of course,
Parallax View,
Manchurian Candidate, and Parallax View, and those would be the only three films I can think of that have prominent brainwashing sequences.
That's interesting.
In terms of memorable scenes that you never forget, I know a couple of years ago when I had my cataract surgery, and at the time I didn't know what to expect. And I imagined being like Malcolm McDowell in that movie with his eyes propped open.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that because I remember that was 50 years after the fact. I still remembered that stuff, and I didn't want that to happen. I want to say, if you ever get cataract surgery, it's not like that at all, but I didn't know at the time. So it stuck with me, sure. And if you read about the making of it, they had to do that. I mean, it was real. They did that to his eyes. Apparently at one point he's got his eyes scratched. The guy's putting drops in it. It's an actual eye doctor because he needed the drops because otherwise his eyes were just going to crap out on him.
Wow.
He's worried because Kubrick does 80,000 takes all the time and everybody knows it. So they're thinking, oh my God, I'll tell you another one I hadn't heard before. The big guy who carries the guy around in the wheelchair. That's
Yes.
right. John, what's his name? David Prowse. And
That's so weird because
yeah,
there's such a gay element there. You know?
I definitely saw that. Anyway, he said that it was hard. He was a big guy, but carrying that guy in that wheelchair down the stairs, it wasn't easy. And everybody thought he's a big guy. He didn't care, but it was hard. And he was just starting. He didn't know like from Stanley Kubrick. And so what he knew was Stanley Kubrick did a lot of takes. So he basically said to Stan, he said, we're not going to do a lot of takes of this scene because it's heavy. I can't just keep carrying him up and down. So I guess they only did like 9 takes of that scene instead of 9. It worked as far as that goes.
The one thing I was going to say about the movie, I'll just be quick, is I've always been intrigued by the idea, and apparently it was a real consideration at one point. Before Kubrick made the movie, there was talk of someone, well, when I tell you who it is, then you might scoff a little bit, but there was talk of the Rolling Stones starring in a movie version of A Clockwork Orange. Like they would have made great droogs, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and all. Like there was serious talk about them doing a film version. Unfortunately,
Kubrick. You mean nothing?
Yeah, no. Prior to Kubrick, there was talk in the late '60s of the Stones starring in a version of Anthony Burgess's Clockwork Orange. Unfortunately, maybe the director who was most bandied about was Ken Russell, another master of subtlety. But who knows? I mean, still, it would have been fascinating. I mean, Keith Richards would have made a great droog. Even Charlie Watts would have made a great droog. I mean, they just got the faces.
Came out of that.
I was just going to mention performance.
Yeah, around that time. Right?
I don't think they're connected, but Mick had time on his hands because he wasn't making Clockwork Orange. So him and Anita got to make a performance, and Keith got to sit outside worrying about what was going on in that bedroom.
I would say there is some connection between those two films.
Yeah.
I think, well, performance comes first, right? 1970. So
yeah.
Right.
Performance was made. You're right. It still came out. Performance was out made 2 years before they let it out for a variety.
Oh,
right.
So
it still came out before Clockwork Orange. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering if Kubrick had seen it because I just sort of sense there's some kinship there. I noticed that last thing I want to say is that it's one of, I think, 1, 2, 3 films where Kubrick ends with a certain kind of very old-fashioned song. We talked about Strange Love last time in the Vera Lynn. Here you've got Singing, it goes back to Singing in the Rain at the end, and The Shining also goes back to some old recording from the 30s or 40s.
20s jazz song or something,
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. Maybe, I mean, Kubrick's all over the place with music. You've got classical music, you've got pop music, and Full Metal Jacket. But that may be a particular interest of his. That's pre-rock and roll. I'm sure the 3 songs cover a wide time window, but they're all pre-rock and roll, and maybe had a real affinity for that stuff.
He definitely cared about the music, apparently, and he put a lot of effort into it. So he spent a lot of time on 2001 finding the songs he liked. Had someone going by literally something like 1,000 albums or something of classical music in search of the right song. So
yeah,
that was a very Kubrick thing to do. But
between 2001, Clockwork, and Barry Lyndon, obviously he was a great lover of classical music too.
Yeah.
Well, and he didn't like Nicholas Roeg. He used Mick Jagger, and then he used David Bowie, and then he used Art Garfunkel, for God's sake. I mean, Nicholas Roeg was interested enough to put them in his movies, but I can't recall any, and I mean he should, but I don't remember stars in a Stanley Kubrick movie. Why would he? Doesn't have to.
Yeah.
But his interest, that might tie into his interest in classical music. He couldn't find Beethoven in a casting call, so music instead.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I had misunderstood your point a little bit, though, because you're talking specifically about pop. But I think even with the classical, I think he kind of does use it in a pop fashion. But anyway, that's a different.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, he seems to music seems important. Probably every film after.
Like I said before, 2001, the soundtrack, it might as well have been a pop album based on how many of me and my friends had it and listened to it all the time, as if it was another album you could listen to.
yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that.
I don't know if music plays any role in Lolita. I just don't remember. But from Strangelove on.
No, there's a
there-
couple of songs I think that kind of like that yay yay almost like yay. What's that French style of music? There's a couple things
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of like
yeah.
that. A little
Yeah,
bit can't. It's like this campy sort of 50s music. I think not
Okay.
quite rock and roll. I'd have to hear it again, but there is some stuff in there. I think it was stuff written for the movie though.
Well, I think you can say music then through most of his filmography is extremely important, 1 degree, right up to Eyes Wide Shut.
Yep.